Carry On Constitution. Chapter 2.
Tim Halloran watched as each ship maneuvered away from the Enterprise and began to speed toward the galactic center, each ship on a slightly different course. His strategy was to keep the ships out of sensor range of one another and yet close enough to respond to any situation quickly. If need be, to bring the entire fleet to bear on any situation, each ship would maintain a specific distance from the others also to ensure only one ship at a time would enter the area to be surveyed. Finally, the USS Halloran was the final ship to depart. Tim turned to his first officer, Commander Tal, a Hephaestus much like his old and dear friend, Ambassador Tyrell.
The con is yours, Mr. Tal. Take us out.
As the Constitution began to slip into ultralight drive, the sounds around the bridge took on the usual slightly muffled quality that the crew knew too well. Each officer and crewman bent to their task, glad to be about the routine that always came at the beginning of a new mission. David turned to Larry. Number 1, at 16:30, I want a meeting with all command officers and senior lieutenants in the conference room. I will be briefing everyone on the mission and our strategy. As for now, Commander Jacobs, you have the con. Larry, let's go into the ready room. David and Larry entered the ready room, and David explained everything he knew about the problem and the strategy the fleet had begun to draft. We will be refining the strategy as we drive toward P387. Larry replied.
Well, sir, I'll put my thoughts on the problem. Anything else, sir?
David answered, yes. Admiral Halloran wants new ideas. So, we are going to be encouraging our crew to use their imagination. Larry questioned.
What kind of ideas, sir?
David chuckled, as Admiral Halloran said, ideas like the Champion Stevens shield generators, ideas like scanning the sea under the polar ice cap. No matter how wacky, I say, as wacky as an idea might sound, we need to examine each one thoroughly. Larry smiled.
Well, our crew is capable of coming up with wacky ideas.
David said, I'll cover all of this evening with the officers. I covered it with you now, because I will need you at the con. Okay? Larry turned.
Yes, sir. If there's nothing else, I'll go take the con.
David waved a dismissal. Fine. Let's start running some battle drills. Just to hone the crew's responses. Larry gave a thumbs up and left.
Aye, sir.
David could hear the battle drills as they began, while he did some of his routine administrative chores. After several hours, he left the ready room. Larry, how goes the drills? Larry shrugged.
We're improving, but we are still a little too slow for my taste.
David brightened. Well, let's stop for now and pick it up tomorrow. Pick out some targets and work in some practice with the plasma cannon and the lasers. Larry replied.
Aye, sir.
David stopped at the lift. Oh, Larry, I also want you to brief the second watch to do target practice and battle drills, and tell Joel to brief third watch. Larry nodded.
Aye, sir.
David stepped back into the ready room and continued his administrative duties until time to meet his officers. David left the ready room and headed for the conference room. In the conference room were assembled all senior lieutenants and command officers. There, David briefed his people on the real reason for the mission, the strategy, and the need for new ideas. It took about 20 minutes to cover all the questions. He dismissed the assembled officers and headed for his cabin. When he arrived at his cabin, he found Stella waiting.
You need to go get little Davy.
This was a routine that they had agreed on when Davy was born, and they stuck to it as best they could. David went on to the nursery and swung little Davy onto his shoulders. Walking back to the cabin this way, father and son talked about Davy's day. The ship had 26 children aboard. Every member of the crew was proud of the children and probably overindulged them. Each family aboard kept their children with them. Even though the ship could very well be engaged in extremely hazardous duty, it was universally accepted by the crew that families stayed together. David was fond of saying, "We can stand anything as long as we are together." The two Stevens men arrived at their cabin to find that wife and mother had an excellent meal waiting. The little family had dinner and then retired to the living area. There, father and son began to exercise together. When little Davy had reached an age to understand, David began to teach him the martial arts he had learned. After half an hour, they called it quits, and the boy crawled onto his mother's lap. David sat close by them, and they began to read one of little Davy's favorite stories, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Being from the 20th century, David and Stella had a love for real books and had a good library of books in their cabin. Among the collection were not a few children's books, and they instilled in their son a love of books like their own. After the story was over, the three just sat for a little while, and then it was little Davy's bedtime. He was shooed off for his bath, and the couple sat in the quiet until he had completed his bath and was ready to be tucked into bed. Mother and father stood looking down at their son. He looked very much like his dad, but he also had features like his mother. He did have the curly blonde hair and deep blue eyes like his mom and a muscular build like his dad. All in all, his mother and father loved him very much. David was aware of the ongoing battle drills and target practice. Finally, he called Commander Carson. "Joel, how are the drills going?" Carson replied.
"We're improving, but still a little slow. But our target practice proves we are excellent in that department."
David smiled. "Great, knock it off for the evening and pick it up again tomorrow,"
"Aye, aye, sir,"
was Joel's reply. After a while, Stella and David retired for the night. David awoke around 0400, aware of the battle drills. He called the bridge. "Mr. Kiter, how are things going?" Kiter answered.
"Sir, these drills have shown me we need more drills. However, we are improving."
David asked, "And the target practice?" Kiter answered.
"In that, we are doing quite well, Captain."
David was satisfied. "Great. Stop for now and resume tomorrow." Kiter responded.
"Aye, sir."
With that, David went back to sleep. The next morning David and Stella rose together and prepared for the day ahead. This was the routine that went on for 4 months as the mighty Heavy Cruiser sped toward the orbit of P-387,